Dad once told me straight-faced across our dining table, "Your brother deserves it." The house, the cash, the entire family company, he handed it all to Ryan, like I'd never spent 15 years holding that place together. I walked away that night with nothing but my car and my pride. This morning, after 2 years of silence, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Mortgages due. Can we talk?" I almost laughed. Until the second message appeared, because whatever they were hiding, whatever they were afraid of, had my name written all over it. My name is Cheryl, and for most of my life, I believed loyalty could fix anything family business, even the wounds you pretend don't hurt. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Boston in a colonial house my grandfather built after turning a tiny garage operation into a respected construction business. People loved to say we were the picture of a hard-working American family. But inside those walls, everything revolved around one truth. Ryan, the youngest, the only son, was the chosen one. I learned that before I even understood the word favoritism. When I was 12, Dad had the company crews build Ryan a custom playhouse for his 5th birthday. That same year, I got a bookstore gift card and a cake from the grocery aisle. No one said it out loud, but the lesson was carved into the air. He mattered more. My mother brushed it off with her gentle voice, saying, "Dad just had traditional values." But those values followed me into high school, college, and every corner of the family business. While Ryan barely scraped through classes, I studied late, joined every leadership club I could, and built a path toward the company I hoped one day to help lead. I graduated with degrees in business and construction management. Ryan finally settled on an easy major after changing directions 3 times. When I joined the family business full-time, I thought Dad would finally see me. I arrived early, stayed late, and worked every department from estimating to project coordination. I knew the names of every foreman, every subcontractor, every administrative assistant. Meanwhile, Ryan was given a corner office, a title he never earned, and a company car he didn't even know how to maintain. I still believed results would speak for themselves. When a major medical complex fell behind schedule and Ryan conveniently took a 3-week vacation, I stepped in. I spent 6 weeks on site, 14 hours a day, reorganizing teams and negotiating with subcontractors. We finished 2 days early. The client shook my hand and said it wouldn't have happened without me. Dad overheard, nodded, and replied, "The Patterson men know how to deliver." The sting of that sentence stayed with me longer than it should have, but nothing prepared me for the night everything finally snapped. Mom invited us to dinner, saying Dad had an announcement. I remember arriving early, holding a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch, waiting for what I thought was the next chapter of my future. Instead, Dad lifted his glass, smiled proudly at Ryan, and said he was transferring the company, the house, and the family investments to the rightful heir. To me, he offered 3 months of severance and the company car I'd been driving. I walked out that night, heart-pounding pride barely holding me upright. I packed what I could into my trunk, drove to the airport before sunrise, and started over in Chicago. New city, new business, new life. I thought I'd close that chapter forever, but the text from my mother proved the past wasn't done with me yet. Chicago didn't welcome me gently, but it welcomed me honestly. No history, no shadows of my father's expectations, no reminders of the company I once bled for. Just a skyline sharp enough to cut through the bruises I carried from Boston. I rented a small, furnished apartment, hung up the one framed photo I kept of my grandfather standing beside his first truck, and told myself I was rebuilding, not escaping. Starting a consulting business in a city where no one knew my name was humbling. I cold-called developers, visited job sites in borrowed boots, and spent nights rewriting proposals that never got answered. But slowly, people noticed. A project manager from a mid-sized developer hired me to salvage a failing renovation. Then another client referred me. Then another. Within a year, I had a steady roster and 2 part-time assistants, women like me, who'd been overlooked in their old companies and were hungry to prove something. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen for my work, not my last name. And then the emails from Boston started trickling in. The first came from Barbara, my parents' longtime neighbor. She wrote that the landscaping around my childhood home had gone wild, the lawn uncut, the shutters peeling. She mentioned my parents didn't renew their country club membership, something unthinkable for them. She said trucks from the family company no longer parked in the driveway. A quiet worry seeped through every sentence. I stared at her message for a long time before closing it. I didn't respond. A month later, I received a second email, this one from Martin, the head estimator who'd worked with my father for decades. Cheryl, I left the company today. Ryan fired Dolores and Jim, said they were too expensive. His note ended with, I thought you should know before things get worse. I deleted that one too, though my stomach twisted as I hit the key. But the messages kept coming. A former project manager told me contracts were falling apart. A subcontractor said payments were late. A developer warned the company was on the verge of being dropped from a major project due to quality issues. Every update chipped away at the version of the business my grandfather built and the version I had tried to save for so long. Still, I stayed silent. It wasn't my fire to put out anymore. And then came the night everything broke open. I had just finished reviewing a proposal in my Chicago office when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a blurry screenshot of a conversation between two former employees discussing unpaid wages and the possibility that the company might fold within weeks. Underneath the screenshot, the sender had typed, "Only, you should call your parents." I didn't. Instead, I sat in my dark office, city lights flickering against the glass, realizing something I hadn't let myself admit before the collapse I had once feared was already happening. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the history, a part of me felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Leverage. The breaking point didn't arrive with a bang. It came quietly in the middle of a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing material schedules for a client. My phone buzzed once, just once, and I nearly ignored it. But the preview line stopped me cold. Mortgages due. Can we talk? It was from my mother. For nearly 2 years, she'd avoided saying anything real to me. Birthday texts, generic holiday greetings, nothing more. And now, suddenly, she wanted to talk about a mortgage on a house that had been fully paid off when I left Boston. A slow, steady heat rose under my skin. I set my tablet down, wiped my palms on my slacks, and reread the message. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the night they handed everything to Ryan, just a plea wrapped in avoidance. I typed back before I could soften it. Ask your heir. I hit send. No hesitation. For the first time in my life, I didn't cushion the truth. The typing bubbles appeared immediately frantic and unsteady. Cheryl, please don't be like this. We're in trouble. Your father won't admit it, but the company, I silenced my phone. For the rest of the day, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept circling back. A mortgage meant desperation. A mortgage meant they'd leveraged the one asset they once valued more than me. And if they were reaching out to the daughter they discarded, things were worse than anyone had admitted. At 6:12 p.m., as I packed up my laptop, another notification lit the screen. Dad, call me. It's urgent. The last time he spoke to me, he told me Ryan deserved everything I'd spent my adulthood building. I let the phone buzz out. Then a voicemail came through. Against my better judgment, I listened. Cheryl, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But the company is facing challenges. We're running out of options. Challenges. He couldn't even say the word collapse. A long silence filled the recording before he said very quietly, "We need your help." My throat tightened, not from sympathy, but from the shocking, surreal reversal of roles. He had never asked me for anything, not once. I had given and given and given, and he had taken every ounce of it for granted. Now he finally understood what it felt like to need someone who might not choose you back. I called him that night, not out of obligation, out of clarity. Before we say another word, I said I want everything on the table. Payments, bills, contracts, loans, all of it. If you want my help, I need to see the truth. He exhaled a sound more tired than I'd ever heard from him. Come home, he said. We'll show you everything. Home. Funny word. I didn't answer. I booked a flight for Friday, packed a small suitcase, and left my Chicago apartment before sunrise. Whatever waited for me in Boston, one thing was already clear. This time, I wouldn't be walking in as the daughter begging to be seen. I'd be walking in with the power they never believed I'd have. I landed in Boston just after noon, the winter air sharp enough to sting as I stepped outside. The city had always carried a heaviness for me, but this time it felt different, lighter somehow, because I wasn't returning as the overlooked daughter, desperate for approval. I was coming back as someone who no longer needed anything from them. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar route toward the suburbs. As the houses grew larger and more spaced apart, memories I'd buried rose uninvited. The smell of my mother's Sunday roast, the creak of the staircase. I wasn't allowed to run on my father's booming voice echoing through the halls whenever Ryan did something impressive like breathing. But nothing prepared me for the sight of the house itself. The shutters were chipped, the driveway cracked. The lawn, the same lawn my father once treated like a public monument, was patchy and brown. The absence of the company truck parked proudly out front was louder than any foreclosure notice could ever be. I stepped inside without knocking. The door wasn't even locked. The living room looked like an evidence board. Stacks of payments bills, loan statements, contractor disputes, and red-stamped warnings covered the coffee table. My mother sat on the couch, wringing her hands. My father stood pacing behind her, his shoulders hunched, his once commanding presence replaced with something smaller, something defeated. And Ryan, my brother, sat in the armchair, tanned from some trip. I was sure the company paid for scrolling on his phone like he'd been inconvenienced by needing to show up. Mom stood first. "Cheryl, honey, don't I said, but not unkindly. Not yet." Dad stopped pacing. "We appreciate you coming." Things escalated faster than expected. I walked to the table, set down my bag, and began sorting through the documents. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined: missed payments, penalties, piling on penalties, project delays so long they'd triggered breach of contract claims. "You mortgaged the house," I said quietly. Dad swallowed. "The company needed cash flow. Just temporary." "Is that what you told the bank?" I held up a notice stamped in bold red. "Because they don't seem to agree." Ryan finally looked up. "Can we not do this right now? Dad said you're here to help, not lecture." I turned toward him slowly. "You think this is a lecture?" His smirk faltered. I picked up another stack. Expense summaries. Travel charges, vendor statements. "Tell me, Ryan, did you think the company wouldn't notice dozens of personal trips billed as client development? The boat, the Florida condo, the resort weekends, What is this? Spa packages?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "I was building relationships. That's what a CEO does." "You weren't a CEO," I said. "You were a child handed a loaded weapon." Dad cleared his throat. "Cheryl?" "No," I said. "We're not softening this." Mom looked between us, her eyes full of the fear people get when they realize the consequences have finally caught up. I opened one more folder: loan statements Ryan had signed without understanding the interest terms or the repayment schedule. "These decisions didn't just drain the company," I said. "They drained your retirement. They jeopardized the incomes of 47 employees. And then when the house you chose over me fell into trouble, you contacted me because suddenly the daughter who didn't deserve it was useful again." Dad winced. "Cheryl, I know what I said, and I regret." "You don't get to apologize yet," I cut in. "We're not done." Ryan crossed his arms. "You always think you're so perfect. You don't know what it's like to run a company." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Ryan, I ran it for 15 years. You just took the credit." The room went silent. I sat down, folding my hands on the table. "Okay, let's get to why I'm actually here. Because I assume you didn't call me just to confess your mistakes." Dad sighed. "We need a restructuring plan. The bank is threatening legal action. Clients are leaving. We thought if you could return in a leadership capacity, maybe COO or CFO." "No," I said immediately. Mom blinked. "But sweetheart, no." I leaned forward. "I'm not coming back as an employee. I'm not putting my name and reputation on the line while Ryan keeps a title he never earned." Ryan scoffed. "Excuse me." "Quiet," I said, not raising my voice but making the air shift anyway. Dad's shoulders sagged. "What do you want, Cheryl?" Finally, the real question. I want controlling interest, I said. Majority ownership, full decision-making authority, operational, financial, strategic, everything. Ryan stood so fast the chair scraped. Absolutely not. This is my company. I tilted my head. Is it because it looks like the bank owns more of it than you do? Dad ran a hand over his face. Cheryl, majority is a big ask. So is rescuing a sinking ship, I replied. But I'm the only one in this room who has done it before. Mom's voice cracked. But the company has been in the family. It still will be, I said, but under someone who can actually keep it alive. Ryan shook his head. This is insane. Dad, you can't let her do this. She left. She gave up. That hit something in me, not because it was true, but because it showed exactly how little he understood. I didn't give up, I said quietly. I was pushed out. The night Dad told me I didn't deserve what I built, that you were the heir, I realized staying would cost me more than leaving ever could. Dad closed his eyes, shame flickering across his face. I continued, now you want me back. You need me back. But if you want my expertise, if you want my integrity, if you want the results, I know I can deliver. Then it comes with terms. Clear ones. Which are? Dad asked weakly. I counted them off with my fingers. 1, majority ownership. 2, Ryan steps down from any financial or operational authority. 3, I choose the leadership team. 4, complete transparency. Every payment, every bill, every contract. 5, you don't interfere. Not once. Ryan exploded. You're ruining everything. No, I said. I'm saving it. Something you were never willing to do. Mom covered her mouth. Dad stared at the table. Ryan paced like a cornered animal. Finally, Dad whispered, if we say no, then you lose the house, the company, and every employee who trusted you, I said calmly, and I walk away again. For good. A long, trembling silence filled the room. Then Dad reached for a pen. Mom squeezed her eyes shut in relief or maybe resignation. Ryan looked at me with something between hatred and fear, but it didn't matter. The documents sat on the table. Dad signed first. Mom followed her hand, shaking. When the pen slid toward Ryan, he hesitated. This isn't fair, he muttered. Neither was the last 15 years, I replied. He signed. And just like that, the power that had been denied to me my entire life shifted into my hands with a single stroke of ink. But signatures were the easy part. Now I had to save the company that broke me on my terms. Saving the company wasn't glamorous. It was early mornings on job sites where subcontractors eyed me with a mix of hope and disbelief. It was late nights in the office rebuilding systems Ryan had torn apart. It was phone calls with vendors I'd known for years asking them to give us one more chance with my name, not my father's, as the guarantee. I rehired the people who'd been pushed out. Martin returned first relief, softening the edges of his usual seriousness. Dolores came back 2 days later, hugging me so tightly I felt years of exhaustion leave my body. Together, we rebuilt from the inside out. Transparent budgets, realistic timelines, clean contract reviews, quality checks that didn't get waved away for convenience. Ryan stayed, but under limits he didn't like. Client relations only, no credit cards, no authority. Some days he sulked, some days he tried. All of it was noise I chose not to absorb. By month 4, the bleeding had stopped. By month 6, we were breaking even. By month 9, 2 clients returned cautious but willing to test the new management. When the first profitable quarter hit, my father called just to say, "You did it." No speeches, no excuses, just acknowledgement. My parents sold the house, settling into a smaller place closer to town. When I visited, they seemed lighter. Humbled, maybe. More aware of the world beyond tradition. As for me, I hired a seasoned executive to run Boston's day-to-day while I returned to Chicago. My office there felt different now, not like a hiding place, but a beginning I had chosen. One evening, looking out over the skyline, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Thank you for saving our legacy." I typed back slowly. It was never about legacy. It was about finally doing what was right. In the end, rescuing the company wasn't the victory people assume. The real win was reclaiming my place in a story that once tried to write me out. I didn't return for approval or forgiveness. I returned because 47 families depended on someone choosing integrity over pride. And maybe finally, my parents understood the difference. If you've ever had to fight for the respect you should have been given all along, you're not alone. Some of us learn to stand up only after we've been pushed out. Share your story in the comments. And if this one meant something to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.